Welcome to the Missouri Times 24th District Senatorial Debate between Representative Joel Schupp and Ashcroft. One of the biggest races in the entire state. And when the Senate, every senator matters. So it definitely will be something that impacts everyone watching throughout Missouri. And we thank you for joining us this afternoon. We'll start with some opening statements. Representative Schupp, we'll ask you to go first, followed by Mr. Ashcroft.
Thank you to the Missouri Times for providing this opportunity. I'm State Representative Jill Schupp, and I'm running to be our next state senator because I want to see the state I love get back on track and move forward. When we support policies that put the middle class ahead of special interests, we help create an economy that works well for all of us. When we ensure that our kids have access to a quality public education and that our college students graduate without having to overcome a mountain of debt, we help ensure a dynamic and vibrant future for the next generation of job creators, innovators, employees, and leaders. When we focus on policies that help seniors age in their own homes and encourage small business success and allow working people to make a decent living instead of focusing on issues designed to divide us, like limiting women's access to health care, then we are moving Missouri in a positive direction. We stay on the right track when we honor our veterans by helping them access health and mental health services. But when state policies promote arming teachers or breaking our promise to students by underfunding our schools or pushing districts into bankruptcy, as they do now, we're off track and are doing real harm. When single donors and special interests can use their money without limitation to buy influence over elected officials in Missouri, it is clear our ethics laws are sorely lacking. We can do better. You know me. My public service is an open book, and my office has an open door. We share a vision of what a strong and vibrant Missouri might be. We know what it will take to encourage future generations to want to raise their families here, as many of us have. Thank you for watching today. I appreciate the opportunity to earn your support.
Hello, my name is Ashcroft, and I'd like to first thank the Missouri Times for providing this opportunity to speak to you about my vision for how we can make the 24th District better and how we can continue to grow the state of Missouri and create better opportunities for the people of the district. I'm running for the state Senate because I believe that the purpose of government should be to protect our ability to live our lives as we would like to, as long as we're not hurting someone else. As Thomas Jefferson said, the purpose of government is to protect us from others and not from ourselves. As long as government tries to protect us from ourselves, it gets in the way of us being able to make the decisions that we know best and to live our lives the way we would like to, which also stops us from being able to be as successful as we could be. As a father of 3 children, an engineer, having worked in the defense industry, taught at the community college as a professor of engineering for 6 years, and working as a lawyer now, I understand how we can change things in Jefferson City, how we can have individuals in Jefferson City that will listen to the people of this district instead of telling the people of this district, and how we can create a better environment for economic growth and an ability for all of our children to have a better opportunity for education and to live their lives to the best that they can. I thank you for taking your time to participate by listening or watching this event, and I thank you for your just participating in the electoral process. I ask that you would vote for me on November 4th. Thank you very much.
Thank you. The first topic will lead you, Mr. Ashcroft. Why are you running for state Senate?
Well, as a husband and father of 3 children, I'm really concerned with the opportunity that my kids will have when they get older. When I was growing up, it was well understood that if you worked hard, you would have greater opportunity than a previous generation. That was the promise of America. And I've been concerned as I've looked at other individuals with older children who are graduating from college that aren't finding the opportunities they'd expected to find, and friends and colleagues that are in jobs that were not the jobs they hoped to be in, that they just aren't finding that opportunity to excel and to grow and to live their life the way they'd want to. And I think we need more people in Jefferson City that understand that the purpose of government is to protect your ability to live your life the way you'd like to, as long as you're not hurting someone else. I think too many politicians go to Jefferson City just to tell everyone else what to do, and that's not working.
Yep. Representative Schupp.
Thank you. Yes, I am a daughter, a sister, a wife, and a mom. Those roles have informed me. I'm a former teacher and a 20-year businesswoman, And what I've learned is that when you're willing to work hard and welcome people with varying viewpoints and different ideas, you can get a lot of good accomplished. In 2000, I retired to stay home with my kids while they were in school. And I ended up getting involved with the schools and decided that the best way to make some positive change in our school district was to run for the school board. So I worked on practical things like air conditioning our schools, like lowering class sizes to support student achievement, like introducing elementary foreign language. And during my 6-year tenure, all of the things that I ran on were accomplished by those of us who worked hard together. I'm very proud of that record. The reason I decided to run for state representative is because I talked to former state representative Rachel Storch. Many of you probably know her. Rachel said to me one day, "Jill, the work you do is really important, but when you go to Jefferson City, you can make changes in state policy that will truly change people's lives for the better." I listen to those words every day that I serve in Jefferson City. I want to do things that change people's lives for the better. That's why I'm running.
Since the Affordable Care Act was passed in Washington, there's been a debate in every state about expanding Medicaid, and Missouri being no exception. If elected, would you vote to expand Medicaid here in Missouri? And we'll start with Representative Schupp.
Thanks. Scott, like it or not, the federal government is going to continue supporting health care throughout our nation. So the question becomes whether the dollars that we pay here in the state will go to fund citizens' health care in California and New York, or whether those funds will come back to support people who need health care access here in Missouri. This is going to be a really critical issue in the upcoming legislative session. Why? Because in 2015, that is the last year that we have that the federal government will pay 100% of the cost of expanding health care access to almost 300,000 Missourians. Right now, as our tax dollars go to other states, we have sick friends and neighbors in this state who wait until they're so ill that they have to go to the emergency room for care. And often they wait too late. 1,700 people die each year because of lack of access to health care. If the moral imperative for expansion isn't enough, then let's think about why groups like the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, countless faith organizations, including the Catholic Conference, doctors, hospitals, Republican Senator Kit Bond all support access to the expansion of health care in Missouri. Whether it's the infusion of billions of dollars into our economy or the addition of 24,000 good-paying jobs in the first year alone, there is lots of good reason to support the expansion of Medicaid in Missouri. So frankly, I'd like to hear where my opponent stands on this issue. At one point, we know he said he was supportive of it, and then later he indicated when the Tea Party put pressure on him that he might not be supportive. There is no time for equivocation on this issue. As my husband likes to say, we're burning daylight. We need someone in the Senate who will be ready to move and support Medicaid expansion on day one, and I want to be that person.
Well, Mr. Ashcroft, go ahead.
Well, I think that we do have a problem in the state of Missouri with individuals that do not have access to affordable and good medical care. Medicaid expansion is definitely one of the options that's on the table, and it has been debated, and I think we need to continue to debate that. I spent 10 years in engineering before I went to law school, before I practiced law and decided to run for this office, and one of the things I learned about in engineering was that whenever you look at a problem, we need to make sure that we focus on that problem and not just on one particular solution. The problem is that we have individuals that need access to good health care, and it needs to be affordable in the state. We had individuals that had that ability to get that. Because of changes in Obamacare, the funding is no longer there for them. So at the state level, we need to make a change. My concern is that we do what's right for the state of Missouri and the people of the state of Missouri. Missouri isn't quite like a lot of other states. We have about 50% of our population is in urban centers like St. Louis and Kansas City. About 50% of our population is in rural areas. What I support doing is not saying I will vote for anything that says Medicaid or I'll vote against anything that says Medicaid, but saying what is the best solution for the people of the state and how can we provide the best medical care as cheaply as possible so that we're not burdening our businesses and our taxpayers more than we have to, and yet still supplying the necessary medical care. My father-in-law is a rural doctor that works in a clinic that's supported by federal dollars to provide medical care. We need to do that, but I don't want to just pick sides. I want to find the best solution. There's too much picking sides. We need to do what's best, and that's where I stand.
Thank you. An ongoing debate in Missouri has been tax policy. The previous session saw the first tax cut in several years. I'll start with you, Mr. Ashcroft. Do Missourians pay the right amount of tax rate too high or too low?
Well, I think, my policy has always been that we should pay the lowest amount of taxes we can while still supporting the services and provisions of the state government that we need. And I think that that's what every legislator and every government official should do. We should make sure that we are placing the least burden on the people of the state that we can while still providing the necessary support services and infrastructure that's needed as having a government. Every dollar that the government spends comes from you or me, our neighbors, our friends, and we should always make sure that government is a good steward of that. Having said that, we still need to make sure that we have funds to pay for our government. We need to have good schools. We need to have good infrastructure. We need to have emergency support services. We need all that. But we should always say we're going to provide that the governmental support and infrastructure that we need, but do that as efficiently as possible because we're using the people's money and we owe it to them.
Representative Schupp.
Thanks. Scott, I support tax policies that put the middle class economic needs first. When the middle class does well, we all succeed. Unfortunately, the Republican-led legislature in Jefferson City is supporting policies that continue to shift the tax burden onto the middle class. How? By continuing to cut taxes on corporations and billionaires and expecting the rest of us to make up the difference. Just this past May, this latest tax cut is going to leave us $800 million in the hole. Touted as a benefit to the middle class, it's going to save the average Missouri middle class family about $40 a year, and it's going to devastate our schools. And people like you and I are going to have to make up the difference. Tax policy needs to be about encouraging the things we want, like protecting small businesses and helping them grow. And low taxes are only one tool in the toolbox. Talk to any of the leaders from the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, and they will tell you that there are other ingredients that are keys to economic success, like quality education, like an educated workforce, strong transportation infrastructure, and an inclusive and welcoming community. Ultimately, our budget and our policies are about setting priorities, and my priorities are clear. Providing our kids a pathway to opportunity with strong public schools, and making sure middle class and working families can earn what they need to take care of themselves and their families, and ensuring that even the wealthy pay their fair share. My opponent's priorities are clear too. He is funded by the single biggest special interest of all, Rex Sinkfield, and I think we are all pretty clear that this is the guy who wants to create an everything sales tax, shifting the tax burden onto those who can least afford it. What a drain that's going to be for our middle class families and for our economy.
An issue that's always at the top of the legislative discussion recently is gun control. What are your general thoughts on gun control and in the balance between Second Amendment rights? I'll start with you, Mr. Ashcroft.
Well, I think that everyone, especially those of us that have children, are worried about the safety of our kids, are worried about our communities to make sure that they're safe. I think there are a lot of things that we can do to promote that welfare. One of the things that really has been, I think, a very good bipartisan solution was Mayor Slay and Senator Schmidt had looked at the creation of a gun crimes docket or a gun docket. And I think it's very important that we enforce the laws that we have, that when individuals have broken those laws or violated them in a violent way, with guns, that we take action and that we take those guns off the street. And that there are a lot of different ways that we can try to stem the flow of guns to individuals that shouldn't have them. I'm all for that. I think that it's a safety of our community and that we should work toward that.
Representative Schupp.
Yes, thanks. Well, when law enforcement tells us that they're being outgunned on the streets, with everything from access to handguns and assault weapons, it's clear that we need some common sense solutions to dealing with rampant gun violence in our region and in our state. So clearly, in doing the bidding of gun manufacturers and the extremist arm of the NRA, our state legislature has once again gone too far. Last year, it tried to nullify federal gun laws. This year, the legislature overrode the governor's veto, putting into effect laws that allow teachers to be armed in our schools, that allow 19-year-olds to carry concealed weapons, and that allow people like you and me to carry weapons openly on our person. Perhaps even somebody in the room is doing that. That law turns federal law enforcement officers into the criminals when they try to enforce laws in the state, and it doesn't sound like common sense legislation to me. It keeps me up at night to think that in the state of Missouri, we're becoming the wild, wild west, where another Sandy Hook crisis could occur. Many of you will remember back in 1999 when legislation was on the ballot promoting conceal and carry. The people in the district in which we live voted overwhelmingly against that conceal and carry law. And what happened? The legislature went ahead and overturned that vote, just as the legislature has done with puppy mills. This is dangerous, and the people of my district do not want unreasonable gun laws in the state of Missouri. They want common sense rules and legislation. The person you send to Jefferson City needs to be a person who is listening to the community and who is willing to stand up for common sense rules and regulations. I think I'm that person.
Thank you. Since early August, most everyone in the St. Louis area, maybe the entire state's been touched by the events in Ferguson. Many folks have looked for different local communities, the federal government and the state government, to find a way to help. What do you see as the role that the state government should play in Ferguson? We'll start with you, Representative Schupp.
Yeah, you know, hearts were broken on that Saturday in August, and I think hearts still continue to break throughout the state. But the problems of race relations and safe communities did not begin on August 9th. They've been around for a long time, and they're not going to be solved here today with a couple of minutes of remarks. I think legislation has its part, excuse me, but it will be more about leadership and cooperation and a spirit of understanding that move us forward to address the issues of racial tension in this state. What we all want are safe communities, where law enforcement has the tools and the training to do their jobs well, and where families like yours and mine can send their young people outside without worried about violence in the community. When we start to respect the ideas of inclusion and diversity, integrity, respect, peace, and hopefulness, then we'll find solutions to these problems. And they're not and have not come quickly, and they're not going to come easily. But the time and the effort that we invest will be well worth it. Lives are at stake here. Currently, as a state representative and going forward as a state senator, I am and will work with those who want to learn from the challenges of Ferguson and strengthen our communities as healthy, safe, and welcoming places.
Thank you. Mr. Ashcroft.
Well, I mean, the first thing I'd like to say is it was a tragedy. You know, there's an individual that died, and we all, you know, that's terrible. Going beyond that, though, I really think that we need to be careful with politicizing what happened there. We need to remember that lives have been greatly affected, one lost. And I think that far too often we've seen where politicians have decided to politicize this issue. They've called for a vigorous prosecution before there was ever an investigation. And I would want to be one that would caution. I think what we need to make sure happens here is that there is an investigation, which I believe is ongoing, and that justice is served. That if there are individuals that should be punished, that after we have the investigation, we make that determination and that we grant people justice. But I think from a legislative standpoint, I'm very reticent to stand up and say we need to do this and we need to do that while the investigation is still going on. I think the people of Ferguson have been through a lot and they deserve better than that. They deserve to know that there's going to be a full investigation. We're not going to make some sort of knee-jerk reaction that we think will help us in the polls, but we're actually going to look at what happened. We're going to make sure there was a transparent, a full investigation, and we're going to move on from there, because there are things that we do need to be done. But this is not something that we should be politicizing.
Recently in Missouri, some on both sides of both fringes have brought up attacks on the Missouri's tax credit policy. Many people in St. Louis County live in such developments. Many of them live in your district. As a state senator, what will be your stance on those economic development enhancement tools, Mr. Ashcroft?
Well, I think that we really need to look at tax credits in the same way that we look at anything that the government does. I go back to my years as an engineer. I think that any time the government is going to do something, we ought to say, what is the government trying to do? What is the program actually doing? Because unfortunately, I think we can all think of a lot of instances where the government says it's going to have one outcome and it gets a different outcome. And then we need to look at what is the cost to the citizens and what is the benefit. I mean, in engineering, we talk about a cost-benefit analysis, and that's what we need to do. We don't do that with enough programs. We need to make sure that the program is remediating the problem that we've pointed out, and then that what we're paying for it is less than what we're getting out of it. I mean, it's the same approach that we should take for all of our programs, and we should continually be looking at our programs to make sure that they're doing that. Unfortunately, in government, we don't.
Representative Schupp.
So when we talked about it, we talked about low-income housing tax credits specifically, so I'm going to address that issue. And what we've talked about before is that tax policies are really a tool to get what we want. And what these low-income housing tax credits do is provide some of our most vulnerable citizens, like our veterans, with a place to live and help them make the transition from being homeless to becoming productive members of the community. These are the very types of tax credit policies that help real people, including our seniors. And we know that the private sector alone is not going to fill that void. So we need these kinds of policies to help build these low-income housing areas for people to live. This policy intersects very well with mental health and senior services, things for veterans, and the Missouri Housing Development Commission has actually put into place services to help people who are suffering from, veterans who may be suffering from PTSD or other kinds of illnesses, to wrap around services to support the people who are reestablishing their lives in these low-income housing development projects. I'm very proud of that kind of work, and with any tax credit, as my opponent said, we need to know what we're getting, and we need to know that we're getting the most out of those dollars. We need to know that the program is effective. Our low-income housing tax credit is an effective program, and this program suffers when we continue to give our taxpayer dollars away to billionaires who really don't need that money. Thank you.
Outside of tax credits, the 24th District's one of the wealthiest in the state. It has a lot of economic development that happens here. What are some ideas that you could take to not only grow the 24th District, but also to take and use in the rest of the state for economic development purposes? I'll start with you, Representative Schupp.
Sure, thanks. Well, Missouri businesses do enjoy low tax rates. The Missouri Chamber of Commerce, as I said before, has given us some other ways that are important to help develop economically in the state of Missouri. For example, they emphasize to me and to people in my committees that I serve on the importance of a well-educated workforce, both to fill and to create the jobs of tomorrow, to help develop innovators and entrepreneurs who want to live in a welcoming community. We need to put into place good schools for their kids, accessible public transportation, including convenient air travel, and amenities we're known for here, like our great zoo and our wonderful museums and our centers of music and entertainment. Those kinds of quality of life issues bring economic development to the state of Missouri. We can grow our way into prosperity, but we can't simply continue to cut our way into prosperity. We need to stop trying to squeeze the middle class and working people through misguided policies such as so-called right to work and an end to the prevailing wage. We need to give Missouri businesses first crack at state contracts so they'll employ people here at home instead of sending our jobs elsewhere. And let's remember, these low taxes are just one tool in the toolbox that represents what it takes to help develop a thriving economy. I'm proud of my work as a former Planning and Zoning Commissioner because I was there in the 24th District when we were welcoming the world-renowned Danforth Plant Science Center. Bridge Park, which is now on that campus, continues to grow with innovative new startups. In our 24th District, we can continue to encourage the biotech industries of today and tomorrow. It's an exciting time, and we cannot be stifled by believing that the way to move forward is by cutting our way there. Growth begets growth, and success begets success. Let's be ready and willing to welcome the next big opportunity.
Mr. Ashcroft.
I agree that the greatest incentive we can have for economic development is a good educational system. One of the reasons why I'm running, and one of the main motivations of everything that I say, is the fact that every child needs to have an opportunity for a good education. Because if we don't create those educational opportunities, the opportunities that that child has later on in life for pursuing a good job, for starting their own business, for being able to innovate because of ideas that they have, is stunted. I think it's very important that the state create an environment which is conducive to growth. We need to have companies that are growing and that are hiring individuals. As I've knocked on thousands of doors and called thousands of people, the most common recurring theme I hear is people that cannot find the job they want. They're working part-time instead of full-time. They're in a minimum wage job when they obviously they'd like to move up, or they have the skills to, but the jobs aren't there. Or they're working in a job that's less than a job they had 5 years ago. And we need to have an economic engine, which St. Louis can be. The 24th District is an incredible district with great potential if the government would get out of the way. Far too often we, on one hand, have the government inviting in companies or inviting in startups or people to start their companies, and then we start the stifling regulation and excessive red tape when they're here. We can't be doing that. We need to be growing opportunities for all of the citizens of this state so they can move from one job to another and really live the life that they want to.
Last issue is one that's impacted every person in St. Louis County in one way or another. It's a school transfer issue. There was a bill passed last session that was vetoed, and obviously it'll be a big topic in January. The question would be, do you agree with the previous law that was passed? And if not, what will be your solution? And we'll start with you, Mr. Ashcroft.
Well, I think that the most important thing we can have for any child is that we have good local schools. Probably the #1 predictor of how kids do in school and their educational achievement is parental involvement. And if we have children at local schools, it makes it easier for their parents to get involved. If children go to good local schools, it helps them to be involved collaboratively with other students because they're not having to drive long distances to work with those other students outside of schools. It helps them to get involved in extracurricular activity, which helps build character, build camaraderie, teamwork, and also with academic achievement. And I also think good local schools help to bind and grow the community together. Having said that, the purpose of education, the purpose of the state providing education is to make sure that every child has the opportunity to get a good education. And we need to not lose sight of that. Far too often we've said we're going to fix this local school, which is the right thing to do, but we've forgotten to give an avenue for those children that are at that school right now to get an education. And we've got to make sure we don't let years pass kids by without a good opportunity for education. So I really believe we ought to have a two-track proposal. I think the main track is our best goal, and what we need to get to is to have good local schools. But we have to provide an opportunity for children that are at schools that aren't providing a good education or a good ability to get a good education. We have to provide them another avenue for an education. We can't just say, we're sorry, it's too bad, you were born at the wrong time, you were born in the wrong location, you're not going to get an education. We have too many people that have been passed by in our schools, and we need to do whatever it takes to give kids an opportunity for a quality education. That's one of the foundational purposes of government.
Representative Schupp.
Well, education is the reason I got into politics, and Jay, you and I have both been teachers. I believe that every child deserves a quality education in his or her own community, just as you do. I simply do not accept the notion that we can't have good schools in more than just a few places in this state. I think the transfer law is a result of a lack of vision and, frankly, a lack of respect. Consider for a moment the school districts in the 24th Senatorial District. We have Parkway, we have Ladue, we have Pattonville, and we have Rittner. I've worked closely with each of those superintendents, Dr. Jenke, Dr. Marty, Dr. Kilbride, and Dr. Fulton. We know that that each of those districts share some of the same challenges, but each also has its own unique challenges. Kids in Rittner have different things that they need than the kids in Ladue, and how we fund schools is supposed to help make up for those challenges. Almost a decade ago, when the current foundation formula was put into place under a Republican governor and a Republican legislature, a commitment was made with regard to how much money it would take minimally to provide an adequate education in each of our schools. That was the basis for the foundation formula, the promise we made to our schools and to our kids. And today, underfunding that formula, we have broken that promise to our kids in the schools that need help the most. My opponent says schools have more funding than they need. It is appalling, and it is that misguided mentality that has led us to a place where we are now. Some of our schools are failing our kids because people, like my opponent, would rather line the pockets of millionaires than use our tax dollars to ensure a pathway to a brighter future for our students. I think he's wrong on the issue. Thank you.
Now at this time we'll do our closing statements, and we'll start with you, Mr. Ashcroft.
Well, I'd like to thank everyone that's taking the time, to be here while we film this and just reading about it and watching it after the fact. I think that far too often we just spend time worried about, from a governance, the politicians and the policies of individuals that are running, and we forget how important it is for individuals to be involved, because that is the strongest part of our government, is that the everyday, you, me, all of our neighbors, we are what controls and gives guidance to our governance and to our government. And I thank you for taking part in this and being a part of this. I just think this is very important. When I look at all these issues that we have before the state and the ways in which we can improve the 24th district, I think of my children, I think of their friends and other children like them, and the ways that we can provide better opportunities for them, and that we can make sure that the future is brighter and that we're doing the best that we can. I also think that my engineering background will be helpful in finding solutions. I think too many people go to Jefferson City to fight because of whose idea it is, and I think we need to remember that there really is no end to the good you can do when you don't care who gets credit for what you do.
Representative Schupp.
Well, thank you, Scott, and thanks to the Missouri Times for this opportunity. To my friends and neighbors throughout the 24th District, thanks for listening, and thanks for all the support that you provide. As we learned in 2010, the winner of this same seat was elected by just 126 votes out of 60,000 votes cast. Every single vote matters. Colleagues and constituents alike recognize me as someone who works collaboratively to get the hard work done. I seek out opinions and varying ideas from very different people. We know that good ideas can come from anywhere, and that's why I have the support of both Democrats and Republicans in this race. And those are the reasons why I will serve you well as our next state senator. You know me. You know my track record. You know I roll up my sleeves and find energy in working hard with people of varying interests and varying ideas. From practical work to improve student achievement, such as air conditioning our schools, elementary foreign language, lowering class sizes, to a vision for our state that moves me to honor and respect our veterans, to trust women to make decisions about their own health care, to ensure our seniors have the option to age in their homes, and to work for good-paying jobs for all Missourians. I've been on the front lines of fighting for a better Missouri for all of us. I thank you for the support you've given me and the opportunity to speak to you today. It is with gratitude and humility and genuine hopefulness about our future that I ask you to go out and vote November 4th, and to please vote for me. Thank you.
I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank all of our readers. Thank everyone that came here personally to view the debate. I want to personally thank both of you for coming. Thanks for sticking with us. We hope you enjoyed the 24 senatorial debate. And now we have our wrap-up show that we do after it, and we're very grateful to be joined by James Harris, the principal owner of the J. Harris Company, Jack Spooner, an attorney here in St. Louis who knows a lot about this particular Senate district, Representative Gina Mitten, also St. Louis County, and the Executive Director of Progress Missouri, Sean Nicholson. Sean, we'll start with you. Who won this debate?
I thought Jill was great. I think voters are going to have a pretty clear choice between a candidate with a clear command of the issues, who's ready to lead on day one, and a candidate who is still trying to figure out what he thinks about the important issues for the state.
James Harris, you've counseled several candidates before debates and had to visit with them after. How did Jay Ashcroft do?
I thought he did very well. He had a good off-the-cuff speaking. You could tell he had a good command of the issues. He seemed to speak really from the heart. I thought in the education question, he really seemed to me to be very emotional. You could tell from a compassionate perspective on his vision for education, and I think that'll come through to your viewers.
This is the first time a lot of people will see Jay Ashcroft on camera. What do you think their impression will be? Did he, if you were canceling a candidate and you brought him here today and you left, would you feel like you got what you came to get done?
Absolutely. I think they were both actually very smart candidates, clear differences in their visions, and really, but they both left. I would think they were both articulate, well done. Jay did very well.
Representative, who's happier in the car right now?
Well, I think Representative Schupp did a fantastic job. Again, I agree with what Sean had to say about she did have a command of the issues, and she knows where she stands and where she wants to go forward. I think that from the other candidate, what we heard a lot of was, well, gee, we have a problem, but no real vision of how that's supposed to be solved.
Jack Spooner, you know the district as well as anybody. Who do you think won this debate, and what do you think the people in the district saw?
Well, you talk about a winner or a loser in a debate. I saw it more as a chance for the candidates to give their message out, do a little messaging. We haven't heard any from Jay yet. I thought Jay did an excellent job on his messaging. I thought Jill, if she wants to get her message out, would have been much more effective if she would have been speaking from the heart rather than reading notes. I think that's distracting, and I think it takes away from a person's credibility when they're reading their positions as opposed to speaking them freely.
And watching at home, somebody from the district that's an undecided voter, what do you think they saw?
Well, I think they heard the same messages that the candidates have been trying to get out on their TV commercials and on their direct mail pieces. You've got the basic positions. I think the battle lines between Jill and Jay are pretty clear, and I think people know where they're coming from, and probably had a pretty good idea prior to today, but it was basically reinforced by the messaging that they gave.
James Harris, you keep your finger on the pulse. Where does this race stand today? It's the most complicated district in the state of Missouri. Most diverse. You go from the wealthiest zip code, 63131, Town and Country, where the median income's $132,000, up to Charlotte, where the per capita income's $18,000. You have 24% of the voters are minority, a large Asian population, large African American population, Latino population. So I kind of start with that. I think it's going to be a very close race. If I look at a couple national trends, some of these races come down more nationally than state. Like, most people aren't sitting around wondering what they're doing in Jefferson City. Their voters right now are going, do I feel better? Do I feel safer? Do I have more money in my pocket? Do I have good schools for my kids? And so the national environment's going to help Jay Ashcroft tremendously because the Republican voters are more energized, and his name helps with that. And if I'd go back to the last Republican that carried St. Louis County was in 2000, it was Matt Blunt. So he had some advantages. That was the last Republican to carry St. Louis County. But he's campaigning well. I would also say another advantage Jay Ashcroft has in the final stretch is he's kind of been more conservative as far as saving dollars for voter contact. If you go through the last public report, I know we've had a lot of 24-hour reports, but he had raised about $729,000. Jill had raised a little more than a little more than $1 million. But if you look at the TV placements, Jay Ashcroft's been able to marshal more dollars for St. Louis broadcast. And when you have $200,000 for week's worth of broadcast, he's in a good position for the final stretch to make sure when there's all this clutter, there's other people talking on TV, et cetera, that he's getting his message out. So I think he's in a very good spot.
Representative, who's winning today?
Well, I agree with a lot of those points. I think that it is going to be a tight race. I think that again, the issues in St. Louis County are very interesting, I think, to everybody at this table, and where the Republican voters are and what's going to drive turnout. But we also happen to have a county executive race going on in St. Louis County, and I do think that that needs to be factored in. And as far as the TV goes, you know, I think that you give you have constituents on all sides. Some folks are going to be sick of listening to TV because here in St. Louis County, not only are we have the Stanger, the county executive race, but we're also being bombarded with races in Illinois. And I think that those messages often become diluted with some of the, you know, I can't even remember the name of the guy, but who's the fellow running for Congress in Illinois that's the yeller. Everybody's talking about that, but we're not talking about Jill Schupp and Jay Ashcroft in the same way. So I agree. I think that it's going to be very tight. I do believe that Representative Schupp has the ability to pull it out, and I think, again, I do think there is a difference in messaging insofar as that we're talking about specific, concrete ideas and ways to move forward as opposed to, yeah, we got problems, but I'll go and look for the best solution.
All things considered, Sean, who's winning today?
I think Jill Schupp is in a great position. I think, as James mentioned, the Ashcroft campaign is certainly hoping for some of these national trends to trickle down, to pull them across the finish line. But I think what viewers heard in the debate today was that Representative Schupp was very confident in stating her positions because she knows she's in touch with where the voters of this district are. When Jay was asked, what's your position on Medicaid, we heard a whole lot of words, not a whole lot of actual positions, because either he doesn't support it and he knows he's out of touch with where the voters are, or he's unwilling to go forward and say, I support expansion because he's going to lose his Republican base. So I think Jill's in a great spot, and she acted confidently today because she's where the voters are.
Who's winning?
Well, you know, the part about the 24th district that people need to understand. Now, I walked that district from Charlotte to Town and Country. I was in the primary against Jay. I've lived in the district my entire life. I know the people, and I know how they vote. Jill's going to have her Democrats that aren't going to change, and they're going to be Jay's Republicans aren't going to change. The one wild card about the 24th district and why they call it a swing district is because there's a larger segment of the population that tends to vote more with issues and people as opposed to parties. They don't identify, they may call themselves a Democrat or a Republican, and I can't tell you how many doors I knocked at where somebody told me they were a Democrat, and I sat and spoke to them for 15 minutes, and you would have thought you were in a Republican household. So when you say who's winning, it's really who's winning with that segment. Who's touching those undecided or independent type voters and are able to convince them to their side. I think Jill's messaging is still going towards her Democratic base. Jay's messaging, it was talked about with the Medicaid expansion issue, Jay's messaging is more towards that center population, trying to tell them, look, here's my positions. I feel like you do on these issues. I'm going to follow your lead, the voters, my constituency, when I get to Jeff City. And I think that's what's resonating with the residents of the 24th, is they want somebody who's going to do what they want, the people want, what's best for them, as opposed to what they've seen in the past with people in Jeff City acting political, taking political stands, and nothing getting accomplished.
James, the representative brought up a point about the county executive race. How does that impact this?
I don't think it's going to impact it that much because this is the first time in 24 years in Missouri or here in St. Louis County we don't have a presidential gubernatorial United States Senate race to bring people out to vote. If you look in statewide, but then zoom in St. Louis County, in a normal presidential race, the African American community makes about 12% of the statewide vote. In a non-presidential year, that drops to about 8 or 9%. If you go back to 1990, the last time we were in this situation, it dropped down to about 6 or 7%. So it's just normal things. If I'm not hearing the ads, if I don't think, my mom, she might not think there's an election or might accidentally forget. And so, the county executive race, helps a little, but the other races would probably do more. So we really come down to more of a who's going to turn out base, where I would say the Republicans are a little more energized. And I think to Mr. Spooner's point earlier is if I'm a normal person, I'm frustrated. Jay Ashcroft came across listening, very open-minded. I think in his comments, like some of these problems are very complex. We don't have the exact answer. And so I think Representative Schupp was probably trying to move more to the Democrat base. Probably maybe her strategy is to just energize them at this point. And so if you listen to many of her comments, if I was a Democrat listening, I'd be very excited. If I was at 5 or 6% in the middle that they always vote, they're not quite sure yet, I think Jay Ashcroft sounded like a pretty reasonable person, understanding that there's a lot of problems that we have to work on.
Sean, could this district vote Stream and Schupp or Stinger and Ashcroft?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think I agree with Jack that the voters who are going to decide this election are not the partisan basis. I mean, they're going to be people who are voting on the issues, and I think that's actually where Jill's strength comes in on things like Medicaid expansion and gun safety, where she was willing and able to state her positions clearly because she's confident that she's going to be okay with the voters. On Ferguson, I actually thought both of their responses were pretty commendable in that we didn't see a whole lot of grandstanding. We didn't see proclamations about what they're going to do because they were being responsible leaders who acknowledge this is a complicated situation.
Speaking of the issues, Jack, what are a couple of those issues you mentioned that would motivate voters?
Well, as strange as it may seem, the number one comment that I received knocking on doors was anti-Obama, and it was Obamacare. Everybody wanted to talk about that, and everybody wanted to talk about the federal government. When you try to get to the state issues, these voters that we're talking about, these middle voters, see, they're more focused on the larger picture, and they're looking at how D.C. is affecting the state of Missouri, and not so much on the local issues. When you try to talk to them about things like Common Core or Medicaid expansion, which are very complex issues, unless they're really familiar with the issues, they don't want to talk about that.
So Obamacare is the issue that people talk about.
That was the number one issue. Almost every house, I had people chasing me down, people making all kinds of comments. It almost seemed as if the election was about Obama as opposed to being about the candidates within the 24th district.
We're discussing a couple very famous names in this race, one being President Obama, who's mentioned frequently, and another being Jay Ashcroft's dad, the former Attorney General John Ashcroft. Representative, what does that name mean, and is that an impact on this race? Is it a detriment? Is it a help?
Well, I mean, I think that it goes back to what Mr. Spooner and Mr. Harris are talking about in that the Republicans, I think, have been very effective in demonizing the Obama name, and whether that's a good thing or a bad thing is, yet to be seen, I guess, in this November's election. So it plays to the Republican base, and it obviously plays to the Democratic base. And again, we come back to where do the folks fall in the middle? If you ask progressive Democrats about Obamacare, they're going to say that they love it, and if you ask conservative Republicans about Obamacare, they're going to say that they hate it. And so again, how that word is being materializes within that concentric circle of undecided voters or independent voters, that remains to be seen. I don't know about John Ashcroft and what impact that has on that same group. I think that Mr. Spooner makes some really great comments about, I think, average voters not necessarily being all that in touch with some of the major issues facing state politics today as opposed to federal.
Sean, this is thought to be a Democrat district. Maybe a little bit less so in an off-year election, but most people would assume this is a Democratic district. Is the president a liability here, or is that something that helps turnout as an overall positive thing? One candidate was for Medicaid expansion, the other one didn't commit to supporting it. Are the president's policies popular even in the 24th?
I think you're right that this is a Democratic district at its core. The most recent polling I saw from a GOP polling firm showed that the support for Medicaid expansion actually exceeded what Representative Schupp was polling in terms of where people were committed. So I don't think that Medicaid is quite as complicated as Jack suggested, but I will certainly acknowledge that the Ashcroft campaign is hoping that Obama is an albatross that they can hang on Jill. So that's their strategy for sure.
Is the Ashcroft name an albatross on the 24th?
With voters like me, perhaps. I won't pretend to have any data or direct insight on where swing voters might be on that.
James, speaking of famous names.
Well, I think it helps give him a base, some definition. But Jay's really running his own race and proving himself to voters, and that's what, at the end of the day, voters will decide. Going back to the demographics of the district, so the voting pattern from 2002 to 2010 was 46% Republican, 54% Democrat. However, in 2010, it was 52% average Republican, 48% Democrat. So if I was going to take those numbers and look this year where you have still a depressed Democrat base, energized Republicans, you don't really have the national money or national efforts mobilizing voters that we're seeing maybe in Illinois, Kentucky, other types of state. That helps out. So I would say Obama is a big factor as far as if I'm an average person, do I feel better? Do I feel like I have more money in my pocket? Do I feel safer? Then you add, I think, the recent Ferguson situation where families are probably talking about issues they haven't. Do we feel safe? And then you add the fact that average Missourians' median incomes dropped more than the national average. So there's a lot of things. If I'm probably just an average citizen in this district, I don't feel better off. And I think that gives a slight advantage if you have a well-positioned candidate who's articulating a vision, like I think Jay Ashcroft's been doing.
Jack, the Ashcroft name.
Yeah, I can speak.
Help or hurt?
Oh, I can speak to this personally. First thing we did when we started our campaign is we ran a poll. We spent about $20,000 running this poll. One of the questions we asked was the poll to see if the Ashcroft name would have a negative impact in the race. And I thought it would coming in. I've been in the 24th. That's just how I thought, that there might be some negativity associated with the name. I was shocked to see that it barely registered amongst the voters, and going back to the Obama, on the questions that we asked and what's important to voters, the Obama issue came up far and away, I mean, more than education, more than health care, or the social services, was issues with the federal government and with Obama were the main complaints of the voters in the district. So when you ask if it's going to have the same effect in the general as we saw in the primary, I don't think it's going to make that much of an effect. Jill's Democrats wouldn't have voted for, and Ashcroft never probably voted for his dad, and they're not going to vote for his son. But the ones, again, in the middle that are making their minds up on who they like and what their issues are, they're not taking into consideration the J part, but they're still taking into consideration the Obama part. So I think that's going to prove a positive factor, which is why this race is a wild card. Where, I mean, I don't probably do predictions at the end, but that's one of the things that makes this race so hard to predict.
Speaking of kind of moving outside of St. Louis County, the rest of the state, Representative, what do you see the makeup of the state right now, politically? What are the main issues people are talking about, not just about these Senate races, but in other parts of the state that your colleagues are visiting with you about?
I think that the main issues are the same across the state. Economic development is first and foremost, and I think that, as Jack talked about, are people better now, and how do they, what's going on with their pocketbooks? That's the first and foremost thing in my district, and I think it's the first and foremost thing even in the rural areas. But after that, again, we still come down to sort of the big one, education, folks, and it's both sides of the aisle thing. Healthcare is a huge issue in rural areas, and I think that it's becoming a bigger issue in rural areas as we see clinics shut down. There's a lot of other sort of ancillary issues, but I would say that those are, sort of my top three of just people care about education. They want a job, they want to send their kids to school, and they want to know that if something happens to them, that they can get treated.
I noticed you didn't mention anything about Ferguson. And I ask you, Sean, is that an issue in this race? And if so, which way does it cut? Who does it help?
I won't pretend to have any sort of insider crystal ball on how Ferguson will impact the specific race, but I imagine there's a whole lot of agreement across the table that when it comes to jobs and economy, that's number one on where people are, and schools follow after that. And I think there's an actual disconnect. One of the trends we've seen across the state is there's a disconnect between where voters are and where their politicians are, especially politicians whose entire political careers depend on partisan primaries, and they don't have competitive races in the fall. So that to the question you asked Gina, that's one of the trends that we've been seeing.
James, one of the big topics that probably some of the more thoughtful answers were on was Medicaid expansion. What is if this race goes the Republicans, if the state goes Republican again, what kind of positions does that put people that want to advocate for Medicaid expansion in?
Well, I think with Republicans having overwhelming supermajorities in both chambers, the proponents have to really have a discussion about how do we reform health care, because everyone agrees we have problems in rural Missouri, to make sure if I get sick, is there a hospital that's open? Can I access a physician? The disadvantage if I'm in northern Missouri and I have to drive 60 miles or more to a hospital. But how do you balance that Medicaid's now the number one driver in our state budget, even though the Constitution says education's supposed to be the number one priority, and it's eating every dollar up. And so how do you promote citizens within the Medicaid population, I guess, to make better decisions? How do we bend that cost curve so that everyone has access to health care and quality health care, but we can do it in a way that's affordable so we're not shortchanging education, higher education, transportation. And that's a very complex problem, and that's where I thought Jay Ashcroft kind of acknowledged. It's a complex problem. We have to have a solution, and I don't know if that's going to come in 1 year or 2 years, or if you're going to get the governor and everyone to sit down and really have a long-term discussion. How do we fix our healthcare system? Everyone agrees it's a problem. Everyone agrees we need to do something. We have to stop the shouting, just expand it versus not, and how do we reform our healthcare that's fair and balanced for everyone?
I noticed Jay Ashcroft didn't say he wouldn't vote to expand it.
No, that's right. I thought you'd
that was an
open all
interesting
things
point.
were on the table, have a discussion. And I would say most citizens probably would agree that.
Jessica, do you see a way Republicans get in the, kind of come across and get into the expansion mode? Do you see where they can actually push that?
This is my perception. It's not so much a Republican or a Democrat. What I see happening in Jeff City, even though the Republicans have the majority, it has become an urban versus rural issue in terms of what's best for the rural folks and what's best for the urban folks. And they've got to start thinking what's best for the entire state, not what's best for their particular area. And until we get all our politicians together thinking, how can we improve the state? How can we get this Medicaid, what's the benefits statewide, instead of looking how it's going to help someone in Butler County as opposed to St. Louis County. And there's been all kinds of studies and things that people have done to try to figure out how to pare down this budget. But part of the problem is, from what I've been told, almost 20% of the users is 1% of the population. So you have to start figuring out why is that finite group using, and we have our ideas as to why they're taking up so much of the resources, and you have to back them down so it becomes more even across the board.
State legislative predictions. Now let's start with you, Representative.
Oh, no.
What are the important issues and what are the important races in the House this year? Down to about 10 now, a dozen maybe?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there's some great competitive races across the state. I think that there's some races in Jefferson County that I think I'm keeping a close eye on. A couple of races in Kansas City. I mean, frankly, Sean probably has better numbers about that stuff than I do, but. I think there's a lot of close races, and we're gonna know it's gonna be late November 4th, and maybe
where your caucus is right now?
Well, of course not. With 52 members, I can't say that I feel good about where our caucus is.
In the competitive races, do you feel good?
I think that I think that we have. I think we do have a couple of competitive races, and I think that we might have a surprise or two.
James Harris, what do you think? Does the Representatives Caucus shrink or grow?
I think it's going to shrink. I think Republicans are going to pick up a lot of ground in Jefferson County.
Why?
If you go, polling in Jefferson County has shown the president's at 30% approval. Most people down there, they're driving further. They've had to pay expensive gas prices. They've seen their health care on their copay, on their check each month. It's gone up a little bit. I mean, people that notice, like my wife goes through the grocery store. I don't go enough, so I never know what's going on. But she can tell me exactly how much milk's gone up, different types of food. And a lot of your middle-class working families, they're going, like my butcher told me, he was selling more ground beef and stuff. He said people are stepping down. More people are buying pork steaks as opposed to maybe they'd buy on Friday a different type of steak. So I think in Jefferson County, Lincoln County, Republicans pick up ground, and I'm going to be bullish. I think they'll expand the majority, and I think the state Senate will expand. I think they'll have a 25-9 breakdown. If I was be close in two of the seats, but I think that's where they'll be.
Sean Nicholson, is Barack Obama the golden goose for Missouri Republicans? And what do they do when they don't have him to kick around anymore?
I have no idea. I'm so tired of hearing the same tired attacks on Barack Obama that haven't changed since 2009. I mean, I think at some point, we're going to have to.
But to their credit, they've been growing their majority since 2009, in large part with him.
Yeah, there's no question that 2010 there was a buzzsaw, and it really hurt a lot of Democratic candidates. And I don't think there's that same sort of environment this year in 2014, which is why I think Jill Schupp is in a much better position than than Barb was in 2010, right? Like, so John Lampe barely won in a terrible year for Democratic candidates. And so I think that will change this year in 2014. And I think Schupp wins. I think Rorta wins in Jefferson County. And then on the House side, it's my sense that Democrats will have a good night if they hold serve or pick up a seat or two. So there's not going to be a Democratic wave on the House side, but without a big statewide race, the candidates matter, and Democrats have some strong candidates in Jeffco.
Are Democrats waiting on the horizon, waiting for 2016 when they don't have to carry the Obama mantle anymore? Are they waiting for that as a real opportunity to grow their caucuses?
I think the wait for 2016 has more to do with the number of open seats that will exist in 16 and 18 than it does with not having Obama on the ballot anymore. But certainly a competitive Senate race, a competitive presidential race will benefit those low propensity voters.
Well, a party led by someone else besides Obama and Chris Koster would stand to probably do better, right?
Yes.
Yeah. Representative, who wins this Senate race, and do you who picks up seats, and how many?
Who picks? I'm sorry.
Does your caucus grow, and by how many? Does it shrink, or by how many?
I think our caucus grows by 2.
By 2?
Yeah,
Does Jill
that's
Schupp
pretty
win?
bold. That's pretty bold, but I do.
Does Jill Schupp win?
I think Jill Schupp wins.
What's the margin?
Tight.
Tight?
I do.
By 2 points? 1 point? Late night?
I don't know. I think it's tight. Late night, I'll say that.
Jack Spooner, your crystal ball. Who wins this race?
Well, when Jay wins the race, Jay will win by 2 points or less. But if Jill would happen to win the race, I think you're going to see a margin between 2 and 5 points. It's going to be a greater margin. If the turnout, if she's able to drive the turnout, there are frankly more Democrats than Republicans in the district. She stands to do better. If Jay is able to drive that turnout, and the Democrats' turnout stays flat, then he should have about no more than a 2-point victory.
So you're saying Ashcroft by 2?
By 2.
James, what do you think?
I think Ashcroft by 2 or 3. I think you'll see a higher elevated percentage in the precincts along the Highway 40 corridor. I think you'll see a slightly lower or more of a drop off up in the northern part of the district. The district's a little better than it was 4 years ago from reapportionment. Moved out a little further west, so I think that helps a little bit.
Where do Republicans stand in the House?
I think they pick up 2 or 3 seats.
2 to 3. James Harris, Jack Spooner, Representative Midden, Sean Nicholson, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate everyone for watching our wrap-up show after the 24th Senatorial District debate, and thank you very much.